They say a mother would walk through fire for her children. It's a beautiful, noble sentiment, the kind of thing you see embroidered on a throw pillow. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes, you're the one who's on fire. And you have to decide whether you're going to burn to ash for them, or find the courage to put yourself out first. My name is Alara, and I'm 33 now. But the decision that defined my life, the one that branded me a monster in the eyes of my community, and a stranger to my own children, I made 10 years ago. Everyone seems to think they have the right to an opinion on it. They see the surface. A mother who left. They don't see the woman who was drowning, clawing for a single breath in a life that was supposed to be a blessing. They don't want to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the most loving act is to save yourself. I had the twins, Jasper and Finn, when I was 21. 21. My friends were stressing about finals and planning beer-soaked spring break trips to Cancun. I was sitting in a dimly lit nursery at 3 a.m., a baby on each breast, feeling my own life force seep out of me drop by drop. My husband, Sterling, was there, but he wasn't there. He was a good man in the practical sense. He could assemble a crib with the quiet competence of an engineer, he could handle a bottle feeding, he could change a diaper without flinching. He performed the tasks, but he slept soundly through the night while I listened for every phantom cry. He went to his tech job every morning, stepping out of our chaotic, milky-smelling apartment and into the sane, adult world, leaving me behind in the wreckage. He didn't understand what it felt like to have your identity erased overnight. One day I was Alara, a literature student with a scholarship, a girl who dreamed of seeing the Acropolis and hiking the Inca Trail. The next, I was just Mom, a title that felt less like an honor and more like a cage. My world shrank to the four walls of our small apartment, a space that constantly smelled of formula and Desitin. The background noise of my life went from campus chatter and indie music to the incessant loop of nursery rhymes and the high-pitched wail of an infant who couldn't tell me what was wrong. Then, 14 months later, because I am apparently a glutton for punishment, along came Marlo. 3 children under the age of 2. Say it out loud. 3 under 2. It's a state of emergency, not a lifestyle. It's 24/7 survival mode with no extraction team coming. The exhaustion was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest until I could barely draw a full breath. Friends and family would coo over them, telling me how blessed I was, how lucky to have 3 healthy, beautiful babies. And they were beautiful, they were perfect. But no one seemed to notice that their mother was disappearing, fading piece by piece until all that was left was a hollow shell performing a series of functions. Feed, change, soothe, repeat. Financially, we were fine. My parents came from comfortable money, and they made sure we had everything we needed. The top-of-the-line stroller, the organic baby food, a safe place to live. But you can't buy back your soul with a credit card. You can't purchase the person you were before your entire existence became a support system for 3 tiny, demanding humans. The postpartum depression, which had been a quiet hum after the twins, roared to life like a freight train after Marlo was born. I'd wake up each morning with a feeling of absolute, crushing dread. The 4 walls felt like they were closing in, like this was it, my entire world forever. Sterling would kiss my forehead, grab his messenger bag, and leave for his job, something with data analytics. I never really grasped the details, and the silence he left behind would be instantly filled by the needs of 3 small children. There was no adult conversation, no mental stimulation, just the relentless, mind-numbing cycle of their needs. I remember one afternoon, sitting on the floor surrounded by plastic toys, with Marlo crying in her bouncy seat, and the twins fighting over a block. I just shut down. I sat there, staring at a stain on the carpet, for what felt like an hour. I was gone, a ghost in my own life. That evening, I told Sterling I needed to go stay with my parents for a little while, just to clear my head, to sleep through one whole night. He looked at me, his eyes tired but uncomprehending, and a flicker of something crossed his face. It was relief. He was relieved to have me gone for a bit. That should have told me everything I needed to know about where we stood. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was just the primary, and failing, cog in our domestic machine. So, I packed a small bag, kissed 3 sleeping heads, and drove to my childhood home, thinking a few weeks would be enough to reset the shattered pieces of myself. I was wrong. It wasn't a reset I needed. It was a complete demolition and rebuild. My childhood bedroom was a time capsule. The walls were still the same pale lavender I'd insisted on when I was 15. A faded poster of Florence Plus the Machine was tacked above my desk. And there, on the bookshelf, was the evidence of the girl I used to be: worn paperbacks of Kerouac and Hemingway, a stack of National Geographic magazines, and my prized collection of Lonely Planet guidebooks. Europe on a shoestring. Southeast Asia on a shoestring. I ran my fingers over their spines. The smooth, glossy covers a portal to another life. A life that belonged to me. Sitting there, surrounded by the ghosts of my abandoned dreams, something inside me didn't just shift, it broke wide open. I remembered who I was before motherhood consumed me whole. I had been a person with plans. I'd always intended to take a gap year to backpack through Europe, a rite of passage for a girl who yearned for a world bigger than her suburban town. But then I got a full academic scholarship to my dream university. It seemed foolish, irresponsible even, to pass it up. So I didn't. I went straight to college, then I fell in love with Sterling, then I fell pregnant with the twins. One responsible decision after another had led me to this prison of responsibility. I realized with a gut-wrenching clarity that I had never, not for one single day, truly lived for myself. That's when the glimmer of an idea appeared. It wasn't just about getting a few weeks of rest. This wasn't a cold you could cure with sleep and orange juice. This was a fundamental crisis of self. This was my chance, not just to get better, but to finally claim the life I had put on hold indefinitely. Don't you deserve, at some point, to live for yourself? My hands were shaking when I called Sterling from my parents' house. I need more time, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What do you mean, more time? It's been a week, Alara. The kids miss you. I'm not talking about another week, I said, looking at the guidebook for Spain. I need more than that. I need to go away for a couple of months. I was thinking, Europe. To really heal. To find myself again. Now. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, then it cracked open with his disbelief. Europe? Are you kidding me? You can't just go to Europe. You have 3 children, Alara. You're a mother. I know I'm a mother. The words tore out of me, raw and ragged. That's the problem. It's all I am. Sterling, I am not okay. I'm drowning. Don't you see that? So we'll get you help, he said, his voice taking on that placating tone he used when he was trying to fix a problem he didn't understand. Therapy, medication, whatever you need. We can work through this together. But that's so easy to say when you're not the one submerged. Sterling, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. I am no good to them like this. A few months to rediscover who I am, and I'll come back ready to be the mom they deserve. A whole person, not this empty shell. He didn't get it. He never would. But when I explained it to my parents, they did. My mom sat with me on my childhood bed, her hand on my knee, and her eyes filled with a sad understanding. I wish I'd had the courage to do something for my own mental health when you and your brother were little, she confessed. I just thought I had to suffer through it, that it was the price of motherhood. My dad, a man of action rather than words, listened quietly and then simply said, All right. Let's make it happen. He handled everything. Flights, accommodations, travel insurance. They saw that this wasn't a whim. It was a lifeline. They knew I couldn't keep living as some ghost in my own home, a martyr to a version of motherhood that society expects, but that was actively, violently destroying me. The first few months in Europe were like emerging into sunlight after years in a dark cave. The air itself felt different, lighter. In Paris, I woke up in a small apartment in Le Marais, and the day was a blank canvas, entirely mine. There was no one who needed me to change their diaper, find their stuffed giraffe, or cut the crusts off their toast. I could sit at a sidewalk cafe for 2 hours with a single croissant and a book, completely uninterrupted. I could wander through the Louvre at my own pace, spending an hour in front of a single painting if I wanted to. I struck up conversations with strangers in hostels, backpackers, and artists who asked me about my ideas and my dreams, not about my children's sleep schedules. I stayed out late, drinking cheap wine by the Seine, without a single worry about a 5 a.m. feeding. I was just Alara again. The feeling was so profound, so intoxicating. It felt like I was breathing for the first time in years. Sterling called constantly at first, always at the most inopportune times, as if he had a sixth sense for when I was experiencing a moment of pure joy. I'd be laughing with new friends on a rooftop bar in Barcelona, and my phone would buzz with his name. He'd send pictures of the kids, Jasper taking his first steps, Marlowe's first toothy grin, Finn covered in spaghetti sauce. Each photo was a tiny digital guilt trip. They miss their mommy, his texts would read. When are you coming home? The guilt, the crushing, suffocating guilt I thought would consume me, never really came. Instead, what I felt was a clarifying distance. I loved my children, I loved them with a fierceness that ached in my bones. But I saw, from thousands of miles away, that my presence in that state of depression hadn't been good for them. They needed a happy, whole mother, and I was on the path to becoming her. This journey wasn't selfish, it was necessary. My parents were my rock. My mom called once a week, and she never asked when I was coming home. She asked what I had seen, what I had learned, who I had met. "You sound like yourself again, sweetheart," she'd say, her voice warm with pride. And she was right. The fog in my brain had lifted. I was sharper, funnier, more engaged with the world. I was healing. The calls from Sterling gradually slowed. Around the 6-month mark, they stopped almost completely. I convinced myself it was a good sign. Maybe he was finally giving me the space I needed. Maybe he was even starting to realize that this break was healthy for everyone. The kids were resilient. Everyone says so. And if I was being brutally honest with myself, Sterling had always been better at the day-to-day, practical side of parenting anyway. He thrived on routines and schedules. I had been the emotional, chaotic variable in the equation. Without me, maybe their lives were even more stable. I was in Florence, sketching the Duomo in a worn notebook, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible, when my mom called. Her voice was strained, and I knew instantly that something was wrong. It wasn't about my journey anymore. It was about what was happening back home. "Alara, you need to sit down for this." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Mom, what is it? Are the kids okay?" "The kids are fine, honey. It's Sterling. He's filed for full custody." The world tilted on its axis. The chatter of the piazza around me faded to a dull roar. Full custody. The words didn't make sense. This was supposed to be a temporary separation for my health. We were supposed to be partners. "What? That's insane," I stammered. "I'm coming home in a few months," we agreed. "I don't think he sees it that way anymore, sweetie." The fury came then, hot and sharp. It wasn't just about the legal filing. I wasn't ready to go back yet, not even close. It was the betrayal. He had made this monumental, life-altering decision without a single conversation. He had gone behind my back while I was trying to piece myself back together. "Well," I said, my voice hardening into something I barely recognized, "if he wants to play hardball, fine." A reckless, defiant energy surged through me. I wasn't going to let his manipulation, his legalistic scare tactics, guilt me into rushing home before I was whole. I had come this far. I deserved to finish what I started. That night, instead of looking up flights back to the US, I booked a one-way ticket to Sydney. If he thought 6 months was abandonment, what was a little longer? I deserved to see the world, not just get a taste of it before being sucked back into the same suffocating routine that had nearly destroyed me. My healing journey transformed into a global expedition. Australia, then Thailand, then Vietnam, then South America. My Instagram, once a barren wasteland, came to life. Sunsets in Santorini, street art in Buenos Aires, temple visits in Bangkok. I was documenting my transformation, my expansion. I was living, truly and deeply. In Thailand, everything changed again. I fell in with an amazing group of expats and travelers in Chiang Mai, free spirits who understood that life was meant to be lived, not just endured. One of them, a charismatic school administrator named Kaylin, told me about an opening for an English teacher at an international school. It was a real job, with a real salary and a purpose. It felt like a sign from the universe. The kids were clearly thriving without me, based on the occasional photos Sterling's sister would post on Facebook. Sterling was the hands-on parent he'd always been better at being. And here it was, my chance to build something for myself. Something that wasn't defined by being a mother or a wife, but by being Alara, a complete person with her own goals and achievements. I took the job. I sent a long, carefully worded email to Sterling. I explained the incredible opportunity, how it would allow me to establish myself professionally, to save money, and to eventually return as a more stable, capable person. I told him this wasn't about him or the kids, but about my need to become whole. He never responded. The silence was its own kind of answer, more hurtful than I wanted to admit, but I pushed through it. This was about my growth, my future. This was about survival. The next 3 years in Thailand flew by in a vibrant, sun-drenched blur. The teaching job was everything I needed it to be. It was challenging, it used my brain, it gave me a sense of purpose that wasn't tied to another person's needs. During school breaks, I explored every corner of Asia I could reach. I learned to scuba dive in the Philippines, a silent, blue world where the only sound was my own breathing. I completed a yoga teacher training course in Bali, learning to connect with the body I felt had betrayed me for so long. I took cooking classes in Hanoi, my hands covered in flour and spices. I was becoming the person I was always meant to be. Confident, capable, interesting, the crushing weight I'd carried for years about leaving my children simply dissolved. It was replaced by a calm certainty. They were resilient. They had to be. At this point, they probably barely remembered me, which, in a strange and painful way, was a relief. It meant I hadn't broken them. From the scant evidence on Sterling's rarely updated social media, they looked like happy, normal kids. I saw photos of them at a park, on a swing set, a birthday party with a superhero-themed cake. They were smiling, well-adjusted. See, I told myself, clutching my phone in my little Bangkok apartment. I made the right choice. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to remove your own toxicity from their lives. I had been toxic. Drowning people tend to pull others down with them. My parents remained my steadfast supporters. "You sound so sure of yourself now, Alara," my mom would say during our weekly calls. "So confident, this experience has been exactly what you needed." They were proud of the woman I was becoming, and their pride was the shield I used against the whispers of doubt that sometimes crept in during the lonely hours of the night. My initial teaching contract was for 3 years. As it was ending, the school offered me a permanent position, head of the English department. It came with a significant pay raise, real authority, real respect. It was tempting, so incredibly tempting. It was a ready-made life, a good life, a life I had built from scratch. But something inside me had finally settled. A quiet readiness. I was ready to go home. 5 years. It felt like the right amount of time. Long enough to have completely and irrevocably transformed myself, short enough that the kids would still be young enough to rebuild our relationship. Jasper and Finn would be 7, Marlo 6. I wasn't going back because of guilt or pressure. I was going back because I was genuinely excited to share this new, whole version of myself with them. I was ready to be the kind of mother they truly deserved, confident, worldly, emotionally healthy. Someone who chose to be there, not someone who felt trapped. Moving back into my parents' house at 31 felt surreal. The lavender walls of my bedroom seemed impossibly childish now, but it was temporary. A base camp from which I would launch the next phase of my life. I had savings from my teaching job, a trove of amazing stories and experiences, and a core of self-possession I had never known before. The plan was simple. I would ease back into the kids' lives. I would show Sterling I was a different person. We would co-parent, building the kind of healthy family dynamic we should have had all along. I was naive. I was a fool. I reached out to Sterling about visitation. I suggested something casual to start, maybe taking the kids to the park for an hour, or out for ice cream. I figured he'd be relieved to have some help, some of the pressure taken off after managing everything alone for so long. He shut me down completely. "After 5 years," he said when I finally got him on the phone, his voice dripping with a cold, practiced scorn, "You think you can just waltz back in here like nothing happened?" "It's not about nothing happening, Sterling. It's about me becoming the person I needed to be before I could be a good mother to them." He wouldn't listen. It was like talking to a brick wall. He had grown comfortable, powerful even, in his role as the single dad hero. My return threatened that entire narrative. "I'm their mother, Sterling," I reminded him, my voice pleading. "That doesn't just disappear." "It does to them," he said flatly. "They don't even ask about you anymore. We've moved on." No. When I, left with no other option, threatened legal action, he started laughing. A genuine, ugly, mocking laugh. "Good luck with that, Alara," he said, and then he hung up. A few days later, the email arrived. The subject line was blank. Inside, there were dozens of attachments. They were screenshots. From my Facebook, my Instagram, my long-forgotten travel blog. Me at a beach party in Croatia, a beer in my hand. Me laughing with friends in a pub in Prague. Me looking carefree and happy on a boat in Thailand. He had been watching me for years. silently collecting ammunition while I was busy rebuilding myself. The manipulation was breathtaking. He had taken my healing journey, my fight for survival, and twisted it into a highlight reel of irresponsible partying. He was painting me as a hedonist who had abandoned her family to go have fun. My parents, seeing my devastation, finally told me the whole truth. While I was gone, Sterling had masterfully crafted a community-wide pity party. His family, his friends, the neighbors, the parents at the elementary school, everyone had rallied around the poor, abandoned single dad. People brought them casseroles. They offered to babysit for free. They helped him with yard work. He had turned my absence into his social capital. It was disgusting how easily everyone bought into his victim story without ever once considering my side. No one asked about my mental health. They just saw the simple, convenient story: mom leaves, dad struggles, dad is a saint. The custody battle was a nightmare from day one. His lawyer had 5 years of my life, documented in glossy, damning photos. My travel records. The fact that I hadn't contributed financially while I was away. My lawyer kept asking me about my relationship with the children, about my plans to rebuild trust. Like I was a stranger who needed to earn my way back into my own children's lives. The worst part was seeing how Landis had poisoned everyone, even my own parents. They, who had funded my travels and understood my desperation, started making comments about responsibility and consequences. The weight of societal judgment was so heavy, even they started to buckle under it. In the courtroom, I tried to explain. I looked the judge in the eye, a woman with tired eyes and a stern face, and I told her my truth. "Your Honor," I said, my voice shaking but clear. I was suffering from severe postpartum depression. I had lost all sense of who I was. I needed time to heal and rediscover my identity so I could return as a better person and a better parent. She looked at me like I was an alien species. The social worker assigned to our case, a bitter-looking woman who seemed to radiate disapproval, kept using the word abandoned, no matter how many times I corrected her. "You abandoned your children for 5 years," she stated in her report, as if my mental health journey was just some flippant, extended vacation. Apparently, wanting more out of life than endless diaper changes and cartoons makes you an unfit mother in the eyes of the law. The final ruling felt like it had been written before the trial even began. Sterling was granted sole physical and legal custody. I was granted supervised visitation, once a month, for 2 hours. Supervised. Like I was a danger to them. The visits took place in a sterile, beige office at the Family Services Center. A social worker sat in the corner with a notepad, watching my every interaction. The boys, Jasper and Finn, now 7, were polite but distant. They had Sterling's cautious eyes. Marlo, my sweet Marlo, was 6. She had no memory of me as her mother, only as the woman in the photographs Daddy sometimes mentioned with a sad shake of his head. During one of our first visits, I tried to explain. "Mommy needed some time to get better, sweetheart," I said softly. The social worker cut me off immediately. "That's not an appropriate conversation for a supervised visit, Miss Vaughn." Honesty was damaging, apparently. They'd answer my questions politely, but their eyes would drift to the box of toys in the corner. They had their own world, a world built with their father, full of inside jokes and routines I would never be a part of. "Do you remember when we used to read Goodnight Moon every night?" I asked Marlo once. She shook her head, her blonde pigtails swinging. "Daddy reads to me now. He does different voices for all the characters." Of course he did. He'd had 5 years to perfect his parenting. 5 years to be their whole world while I was out discovering mine. What burns me, what keeps me up at night, is the hypocrisy of it all. The world looks at Sterling and sees a hero, a saint who stepped up. He gets praised for doing the bare minimum of what mothers are expected to do every single day without an ounce of recognition or praise. If the roles were reversed, if a father had taken off for 5 years to find himself, he would have been crucified, labeled a deadbeat for the rest of his life. But I am the monster. I am the cautionary tale whispered at PTA meetings. It's maddening how the system is designed for women to fail. If I had stayed, mired in my depression, resentful and emotionally absent, I would have been criticized for not being a good enough mother. If I'd had a complete breakdown, they would have said I should have gotten help sooner. But, because I did the responsible thing, I removed my sick self from a vulnerable situation to get healthy, I am labeled an unfit, selfish woman who abandoned her children. There is no winning, but here is the truth, the one I hold on to in the dead of night. I do not regret those 5 years. They were the best, most important, most fulfilling years of my life. I refuse to be ashamed of them. I traveled to over 30 countries. I learned to speak conversational Spanish and Thai. I built a successful career from nothing. I made lifelong friends with incredible people from all over the world. I transformed myself from a depressed, overwhelmed girl into a confident, capable woman with real-life experience and a perspective that stretches far beyond the confines of suburban America. My children are fine. They are more than fine, they're thriving. I see it in our awkward, supervised hours. They are confident, well-adjusted, happy kids. They have a father who adores them and an entire community supporting them. They have that stability because I had the courage to step away when I was falling apart. If I had stayed, they would have grown up with a mother who was a black hole of sadness, who resented her life and mourned the person she never got to be. Instead, they got consistency with a parent who was present and wanted to be there. So let them all talk. Let Sterling play the victim and let the world call me heartless. I know the truth. I saved myself, and that took more courage than any of them will ever understand. The kids are fine, Sterling got what he wanted, and I became the person I was always meant to be. In my book, even if no one else sees it that way, that's a win. I will not apologize for choosing my mental health. I will not apologize for refusing to sacrifice my entire identity on the altar of motherhood. And I will not apologize for believing that I, too, deserve to live a full and vibrant life. Everyone else can stay stuck in their narrow, suffocating ideas of what a mother should and shouldn't be. I am the woman who had the guts to save herself. And for that, I will never apologize.